So just out of curiosity and for his own information purposes, as I've been following the line of inquiry with so many leads that you cannot ignore the leads of the shape and form of the Irish Clogteach Towers, and then they've got the dumb steeple up at Grange Moor that Richard Beaumont reconstructed. Then you've got all the fairy lore and folklore, which you might not think's hard evidence, but the fact that they mention it in the first place and it exists as a reference point, not only in religious context. Then you've got the shape of the Celtic helmet and the name helmet. You've got all the well-known religious contexts in other countries and religious use as a sacrament in other countries, like the Americas. And then you've got all the Algerian artwork. Only a fool would say there's no evidence, right? So it must be recognised unless you're completely plain ignorant as found in religious sacraments. Now, and also symbolically in the Iron Age cultures and the pre-cultures. And another fact is of Stonehenge and the caps that lock into the top caps that go around the top stones around the top of Stonehenge is that shaped anyway. And if you think of it to the north, you might think that north is a strange direction to say, oh, well, they didn't have a concept of north, but they do have concept of the magnetic force of the planet going in a certain direction. When you draw cave art on walls and you draw a plain scene out in cave art, it's in 2 dimensions. And the dimension that's going away from you or coming towards you is on a flat plane. So they were aware of having to compress 3-dimensional imagery onto 2-dimensional. And if you wanted to symbol somewhere that was... If you had to have a map and you had to hold it in your hands, even if they only made maps, even if they did a map on the floor out of twigs, or if they drew a map on a wall, which way does that map signify to going forwards or backwards if you've done it on a cave wall when it's up and down? So they were very aware of that 3-dimensional space. Now, I just want to note these things, right, because these things are important to note, right? When you look at the biodiversity maps, okay, they even call it a magic mushroom. When you look at the biodiversity, and I know there are very species of these, there is not only one strain. There are some larger ones that grow in England as well. But if we take into account the biodiversity, just to start with, right, you've got stronger patches, but then you've got more consistent distribution. Now, it's clear, obviously, looking at Wales... When you look at Wales, because they've got the Brecon Beacons and it's high up, you've got distribution, right? In this area here, around Leeds in the Pennines, you've just got consistent coverage. It might not be marked on here as super strong coverage. Then you've got to take all the farming pesticides and anti-fungicides into consideration that they've been spraying on crops as well. But the coverage is... It's a consistent level of coverage. Now, the thing that I want to take into account is this. When you go down to Oxfordshire and the area of, for example, Uffington White Horse and Uffington Camp and Wayland Smithy Longbarrow, it's very sparse distribution. And when you look at Salisbury... It's literally very, 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 very sparse coverage. So, in the area, which is known to be in Wiltshire and around Stonehenge, it is not very much coverage. Now, there might be other things going there, like amanitas and things like that, but they're more... common in pine tree areas, particularly high up, like for example in Wales as well, where you've got pine trees. Now, here's Salisbury Plain. It's not very sparse at all, and there's Amesbury. It's not very sparse at all. In fact, it's lacking. So if there is going to be anything in connection with sacrament, if we are going to include it without being ignorant as sacrament, if you build a monument there that's sparse in it, it may very well be that you actually, because you're taking it there, or bringing it there to a place that otherwise wouldn't have it. And it's quite a flat place. So that area around Stonehenge, it's got a lot going on, is significantly sparse, while we are not. So if it's going to be originating from anywhere, supplied to anywhere else, it's going to be this area. Now another thing is this. In that Wiltshire area, if you go down there, out of all the different police areas in England, and I've driven around all of England, and I know I take specific interest in noticing as I'm driving round, when I was driving around the country for my job, right? Why is it that I noticed specifically in Wiltshire, right, that of all the places, I noticed they had some police signs which featured the police helmet, which actually is the perfect shape of liberty anyway, right? Not unlike the Celtic helmet. I've never seen this design anywhere else in England, and I know it's a bit more of an older design because it's kind of a bit dated now, but it has the Wiltshire Constabulary emblem on it, and it has the blue helmet, and it's the neighbourhood watch sign for that area, right? This is from the internet, but now the unusual thing is, we could go into why the police even established to have that anyway as their regalia, but that Wiltshire's the area that's lacking in that commodity naturally. So why do they have it on the helmet? I don't know. Now, if you want to add something else into the equation, now unless you're ignorant again, why is it that Stonehenge, that is in Wiltshire, right, in this place that, according to the biodiversity maps, is lacking, right, yet the police have their actual emblem as the helmet shape, the same shape, right? Why is it that these stones, which were photographed in the 1800s, unless somebody, added it on then or disfigured it or added it themselves, if it's not original from the time it was made in prehistory, why is it the top of them has that shape as well, which is the part that they made to lock into the top stones that drop into it, and once you get them on, then it's damn well hard to get them back off again unless you break them up into bits, right? And that is the shape they use to make it interlocking, and it's that exact shape. And it's at the top. The physical location of it is at the top, not unlike it being, if anything was that shape, symbolically originates in the north. Now, the thing that gets me is when you start asking people about this, they just go, when you find a flint, right, in the floor, and you test it, and it's from Sisbury, from Worthing, right, it's from there because of chemicals in it and chemical constitution, right? There's something about some people, not all people, right? Some people, right, they will not accept that you will draw and shape something and choose the design to make it look like something to give information as well. Not only for a function, but to say something. Because ultimately, what's the point in actually building a statue? Why did you build a statue of Churchill to commemorate Churchill? It means something, right? Things mean something. It speaks. You don't just write in letters. W-A-R, war. Stand, S-T-A-N-D. In a shape. How do you interpret a painting the artist wants to transfer? And that, when you have these sacraments, when you use them, why does it happen to be that the language that comes out and presents itself is a symbolic and visual language inherent inside us, which actually can communicate with? There are people who are ignorant, there are people who are in denial, and just even not, I don't know if uneducated, but they just will not, You can't teach them. Now, I actually believe that Stonehenge in Avebury was actually built to teach. People were brought in and they ended up teaching them in the culture. Maybe they gave up and, thought it was a lost hope after a while, a lost cause. But I actually strongly believe that people can be taught, but you have to get hands-on with these things. And at some point, I don't think the church wanted to continue having people get hands-on learning. There is certain powers in it and realisations, and now they're going the other way. They don't want us to really be learned and educated unless we've pledged to certain affiliations. I don't really want to get into political discussion, but it's like what Neil Oliver says. Neil Oliver has spoken out recently on GB News quite openly about the SNP party, for example. The SNP party, if you support the SNP party, they like you, they like people. If you aren't against the SNP party and you kind of like either, support them a bit or you're either way, then again, they're not too bothered. But if you're in opposition to the SNP party, it's almost as bad as not being Scottish. Neil Oliver was saying, they don't like people who aren't Scottish. Or even if you don't like the SNP. That's what this government has ended up doing. If you are not pledged to support this government and what they're doing, if you're opposed to them, then you literally are getting blocked out and obstructed. And they're wanting everyone to go along with what they want to do. And any real competition, any true competition that could defeat them, not just joke competition like Labour, who are pretending to be opposition but just go in the same direction as them all the time. Real, true opposition that want to go in a different direction. They just absolutely are. You could say it's equivalent to racial hatred. Because what the SNP are doing is, according to Neil Oliver, is the SNP are treating people who don't support the SNP as an opposition and almost with a sort of hatred because they're not politically affiliated. And I actually believe that's how we are being attacked now. People of his own country, people, even white people. Even white people, with certain, attributes, even if they're the same as certain figures in government, then if you're not allied with them, if you're not the friend, then you must be their enemy. And if they see you as equal to them or powerful and you could beat them fairly, they want to devolve your power, remove it, and they will get anyone in. They'd rather have people who are on their side rather than their own kind. Because their own kind who aren't on their side are realistic competition who can defeat them. Whereas people who are affiliated with what they want to do and take their side, regardless of what race they're from, they're friend with them because they've got them under control and under command, really. So, some people complain, about, there's too many immigrants coming in, but you can do that and be an honest person and not be racist with hatred. You don't want to be backing a party that is not honest with you. And the fact is they're making up rules in law now that they can't make up. They're making up rules that cannot be opposed and can't be beaten, and they're lying about laws and rights. Even saying you can't petition and complain about corrupt parliament people, when in the Bill of Rights you've got evil justices and ministers when you can. And then they've got certain affiliated people with on their side who don't really fully understand it and don't get it. And they kind of like, in a way, to, feel more empowered. And I think that it's actually, it's using people and having key people in place for a certain reason. And what it actually is I think technology is being implemented and used all the time. They're saying, we can't stop for progress, They're using progress to beat their opposition. And in a way, they're wanting to target their opposition and actually devolve them in a sense. I know it's, it could, you might, try and say, oh, it's racist to say that, but, there are certain peoples around the planet who have been left off from different eras and times, like the Australians and South America and places like that. Clearly, we've got the technology, and it's not to say that these people can't achieve certain learning standards, and I never would say they were, and there's a lot of people who are different in education, different types of people have got strengths and weaknesses, but this current government does take advantage out of people, and it's to get the edge in power, and that's what the Tories are doing, They're even, Stonehenge, a place of freedom and peace, they pretend to, want to support it and back it up, but at the end of the day, they've actually even been reducing, they stop people going in there, and it's the whole travel. Look at the travellers, for example. This is a really good example, right? If you think of the travellers, right? Now, what the government are doing is they're saying, oh, no, you can't be sexist, or you can't be ageist, and you can't be racist. That's a discrimination. These people, are from China, or these people from South America, or these people from Australia, and they've got a religion. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury is saying, oh, these people have got a religion, right? We must accept all religions now. That's basically what the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Pope are doing. They're saying, we are Catholic or we are Anglican, but we accept all faiths now. We accept Buddhists, their way of life, their way of religion, right? We accept Jews and Jewish people and their religion and way of life. Jeremy Corbyn has been, shunned for supposedly all this anti-Semitism and things. But why is it, right, that you've got, here's another group of people, the gypsies, right? They like to live on the road. And their culture, their religion, is to stay on free land that's not owned by anyone. That's part of their culture and religion. But what the Tories are doing is say, oh no, we're going to make it illegal, so you can't stop here and there or go on land, or you can't, live in caravans and wagons. It's not right. But if you said, if they were Pakistani, right, then, all hell would break loose. If it were Chinese, then all hell would break loose. So what the government are actually doing is they are the ultimate hypocrites and liars. They're pretending to use religion and race, religious discrimination, sexist discrimination, ageist discrimination, and other forms of discrimination as a leverage just to get people to accept what they want to do, right, with the country, but yet they're picking on religions and ways of life, the gypsy way of life, which has a religion and a way of living with it, right? That is discrimination. And that's what Priti Patel and Boris Johnson, they will not self-reflect on it, and they're in ignorance to it just because it's something that they don't like and they want to do. Anything else that anybody doesn't like or doesn't think is a good idea or necessarily don't want to do, right, is we've got to accept it. It's all about what they like, their so-called way of life. Or MI5's way of life, Boris's way of life, the Tories' way of life, right? Now the Chinese' way of life, the Indians' way of life, the Aboriginals' way of life, but not the Gypsies. How can that not be discrimination? How can it not be? And then we've got all the sites in our area, Elmet in West Yorkshire. And actually this area was called Elmet. If there was anywhere going to be like the symbol or shape of a helmet, Elmet, that's here, right? Where you do get all these growing. And it is in the north, pointing to the top, not unlike Scotland, where you find plentiful concentrations, right? We've had our heritage attacked by imperial chemical industries, by Jubilee Towers, and then by, streets being implanted on ancient burial sites and mounds and hill forts, and then the whole area packed in. It's an attack on the area and the heritage and culture of the area. And that is a racial attack. It's an attack on a certain race of people and a certain heritage that was there and established and important before 1066 and before we were conquered, and they don't really want to celebrate it and acknowledge it truly in the true facts and heritage and the true archaeology, because it would celebrate. It wouldn't be celebrating a Jubilee Tower, and it wouldn't be celebrating their, victories. It would be They've had that Emily Moore Mass built, which effectively is like a giant psilocybe as well itself. It is like a giant monument of psilocybe, but it's always London calling, being broadcast from London. It receives transmissions and orders from London, and then it comes out from here. But it's the actual original heritage has been rubbished when it could have been preserved. It is racist. And that's the problem now with the Tories, with doing with the passports, with voting, and with everything. They're actually conning people, tricking them and fooling them. And actually here, this was actually in a newspaper recently, and a main newspaper, a main tabloid. How the Tories got their name. Many of today's British Conservative Party might be disturbed to know that their nickname, Tories, originated in Ireland in the mid-16th century, deriving from the Gaelic word Toride, which meant plunderer, robber, thief, barbarian, yobbo. So, even the nickname of the Tories is questionable. And they actually prove it in their actions. The worst thing is, you ask the average person, and they don't think that any politician. The most people who you speak to, the majority who don't vote, because only a minority vote, only just over a third vote anyway, right? Or at least in local elections, only a third vote, 30 to 40% in local elections. That's why the majority of people that you ask say that they don't like or trust any politicians. That's why most people don't vote anyway. The thing with this heritage and culture is it's about powers. Everything when you see that symbol is to do with police, the constable, right? Constable and policing, or religion. So it's to do with powers, really, and that's why it's illegal. It's actually, at the moment, it's a legal substance. It's illegal. So they don't want you to get hold of it. And they don't even want to celebrate it in heritage. Yet we've got Imperial College in London doing experiments and doing tests with it, and apparently only they got licensed to. So we've got issues that need addressing. Even though there are experts talking about it all over the internet. And the largest groups on the internet with 200,000 members happen to be psychedelics groups.